Are we live?
We're live.
Hello, how are we doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you guys?
All good, thanks.
Not bad at all, not bad at all. Yeah, I suppose welcome to another episode, another installment of Pitching with EngageIQ. Second episode. It was a good one last week with Jonty, and very delighted to welcome Emma on board for this episode. I believe it's around licensing in particular.
Yeah, so software asset management and licensing.
Okay, awesome. I know we've had a couple of pipeline or pitches or calls in the past. Emma, I believe this is a cold call.
Yeah, this is, as you say, a nice cold call. Bit of a tricky prospect. Yeah, obviously never spoken to him before. And I remember coming off this call, it was about a week ago, and I was just really frustrated. And I felt, when you come off a call and you think, I should have said that, I should have asked this. And I was just a bit annoyed that I'd let him basically take control of the conversation. So yeah, it'll be good to get your input in this. Yeah, like I said, he is a bit of a tricky prospect. So good to get your advice on how to sort of like mirror their persona as well.
Cool, that sounds good. I think we all face those kind of prospects. That would be a good one to obviously dive into. And yeah, thanks for kindly putting yourself forward. Obviously, you're someone who's been performing at a high level from a kind of SDR outbound performance over the last year or two, and I think the fact that you're willing to put yourself in this environment is kind of or typifies why you've done so well over an extended period. And I guess for everyone else who's joining, whether you're a new listener or someone who's listened to the previous ones, feel free to dive in with comments, questions. We had quite a few good ones last time. So yeah, a fair few viewers, couple of thousand, I think it was. But yeah, dive in with any questions you want. Any thoughts on what Emma's done? Emma's doing really well on this call. Any thoughts on what you think you might have done differently as well? And let's, I guess, keep it as interactive as possible. Happy to dive in unless either of you wanted to add anything else on top of that.
No, all good on
No, all good. Ready to go.
Cool. Let's go for it.
Nice. All right. Press play. Hit OK.
Hello?
Hi.
Hello?
Hi, it's Emma calling from. I do appreciate I've caught you out the blue, and I'm going to be honest with you, it is a cold call.
Yeah.
I was wondering if
I think there's a bit of an echo. Do you want to try with the headset on?
Yeah, sure.
Just what's going on, I think we've dubbed out the names. Forgot to mention, so that's why at the start there was a little pause or two. But yeah, we'll have dubbed out the names of the prospect and the companies. So if there are a couple of pauses throughout, that's what it would be for.
Cool. I'll press play again.
you had a minute and I could explain the reason for my call.
Much better.
Yeah, how can I help you?
Okay, sure. So it's in regards to software asset management and licensing. The reason for reaching out is we've been speaking with a number of enterprise organisations and finding that quite a few are actually coming across very similar issues. So keen to get your viewpoint on this. So first off, we're finding organisations are still struggling to adapt to the changing technology landscape, often finding that their existing tools are not providing real-time and accurate data for wider IT projects. And they struggle with finding the time and resource internally to best utilise those solutions. But really, what's most prevalent for many at the moment is the growing pressure on the IT cost management side of things. So a lot are looking into optimizing their environment, but feel they don't actually have a holistic view of their software estate in order to make those informed decisions. What we've been doing to help is really focusing on financial governance side of things. A lot of work has been moving that mindset of compliance as the end goal, but working with a lot of organisations about how they can gain greater control over the cost management. I wasn't looking to keep you for long on the phone this morning. Was keen to see how this resonates with you and see if it would be a bad idea to arrange some time for a further chat. over the next few weeks. I'm not sure how you're fixed up on, say, the 18th or the 19th.
Do you want to pause it
Pause
there?
it. Pause it. Yeah.
You go, Steph.
I was going to ask what you thought of it initially before we give our thoughts.
So big alarm bells in that it's too long. The pitch is too long. It's just a bit long-winded. I probably should have focused on 2 points max. And I think there's a little bit of repetitions as well in it. So just having much more of a concise pitch would have helped, especially as he is quite a tricky direct prospect. I think that would have worked more effectively. But yeah, keen to understand what you guys think.
Sure. I think that's pretty spot on, Emma. I think you've thrown quite a lot at the prospect and probably lasted longer than a minute, I would say. And all people know that about 45 seconds, 50 seconds is a good amount of time. But I think the reason for that is ultimately a prospect just answer the phone. They're not expecting your call. There's only so much so they can digest at any given time. And the pitch is really, really relevant. However, you use a lot of words like buzzwords like landscape, real time, accurate, optimize, like holistic, which they're obviously important words, but what do they actually mean? I always advocate SDRs to use a few of them words because they're ultimately important, but then how can you dive into how the prospect might be feeling as a result of them challenges? I know frustration is always a word that comes up, but irritation, discouragement, or disappointment, like when you're digging into that customer's emotions, that's when they actually feel the pain that you're reflecting. That's the only bit of advice, but I think the pitch is strong. But I think that combination of challenges and emotion is such good good balance between the two. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's like such a fair point. I think because obviously the messaging, as in like licensing, is quite complex, and I feel like I've spoken to a number of organisations who don't necessarily have the same challenges and have very, very unique, intricate, different frustrations that they face on a daily basis. So it's kind of, I think I've gone in with a whole view of what they could be facing and not actually delving into like one or two of those challenges and the emotional side of it and going from there.
That's spot on, and because it's the thing is because it's so unique, that means you can go into like one or two problems very, very deeply, and then maybe ask a very unique question off the back of it, because that then shows you really know about the prospect. When you're like, do you ever find yourself frustrated about this specific problem? And the prospect subconsciously might think, you know what, this sales rep actually knows what she's talking about here. But just off the back of that, I think the start was great, straight to the point. You got his attention straight away. There's no faffing about, and that gave you license to actually pitch, and there was no interrupting from him throughout, which is great. So I just let myself catch some breath. Jim, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with what's been said. I think like Jack's put in the comments, knowledge is top tier. Emma, which definitely agree with. There's a lot in there that you mentioned, and yeah, I agree. It's a little bit lengthy. I think was it Mark from Refract, Mark Ackers on one of the previous ones who said, if you imagine someone and you're chucking 7-8 bits of paper at them, they're probably not going to catch any, but if you chuck, maybe one or two specific smaller bits, the likelihood is they're going to catch those, and kind of relates to that idea of one or two specific problems, as Steph and Emma you kind of rightly picked up on anyway, might have been a better way to lead and be successful with that pitch. I also think it was interesting. I think we kind of missed a little bit at the start because of the change in towards headset. Do you want to just quickly rewind that? Because I think you did a really good opening in terms of the saying it was a cold call, being up front. But if you just play that back again and hear his response.
Yeah, sure.
I do appreciate I've caught you out the blue.
Hello?
Hi,
Hello?
it's Emma calling from. I do appreciate I've caught you out the blue, and I'm going to be honest with you, it is a cold call. I was wondering if you had a minute and I could explain the reason for my call.
Yeah, how can I help you?
Just
Yeah,
pause it
sure.
there.
So it's in regards to.
Yeah, obviously, really like the opener, get position, pattern break. Relating to the part about the pitch, like his answer is very short, it's direct. And I think there's such a clue to like in that moment, just picking up on that prospect's persona. You're not always going to get it right, but he's come across as someone who's just said one quick like sentence question, and I think if you're picking up on that, then that pitch suddenly you go from being a lengthy one to a lot more concise. You match his persona, like I think you touched on the start, and you mirror that in terms of how you pitch and keep it concise. That's just like a small clue that might have been the way to go about things.
Yeah, definitely. And I felt like I should have kind of spotted that earlier when he said, "How can I help you?" And it shifts the kind of, I don't know, perspective on things. Like, no, I'm calling to potentially help you, not the other way around. So yeah, I think I probably should have reacted to that a bit better and understood, yeah, exactly like his persona from that.
Yeah, that's a good point. You always need to be a bit more flexible in terms of how you transition from the opener to the pitch. And yeah, it would have been good to perhaps say, look, I don't know if we can help you yet, but we're here to give you an idea of what we do, and then you can decide after that, or something like that. But what I like about what you done in that pitch, Emma, was you didn't talk about you and your business at all, really. You spoke very deeply around what you solve. I know you obviously covered quite a few challenges, but there was no phraseology around how good we are, how big we are, how long we've been around, what awards we've won, where we're accredited with a certain partner. None of that, and I really respect that. I know that sort of approach divides opinion, but I'm a big advocate, and Jim as well, around the ability to dive into a prospect's world. I said last week, a prospect isn't sitting at their desk thinking about how great you are; they're thinking about their problems. So if you can resonate with them quicker rather than later, then be on to a winner.
Definitely. Like, leading with challenges is so key. They don't care about if you're a gold Microsoft partner or whatever. Yeah, exactly. They want to know how you can help them.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Do you want to go back towards the back end of the pitch, Emma? Okay, perfect.
It would be a bad idea to arrange some time for a further chat over the next few weeks. I'm not sure how you're fixed up on, say, the 18th or the 19th.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean by all of that. I mean, say we have IT asset management function. Is that what you mean, or?
Yeah.
Pause
So
there.
yeah, our IT asset management.
Stef, if someone was to go to you like after you pitched, I don't quite understand what you actually do. How would you combat that?
Just I haven't told you yet. No, I would say that's fair. I haven't gone into that yet. But I don't want to waste time and tell you what we do, and if none of the above resonated in your world. Do you mind asking do you mind me asking if anything did before I give you an idea of what we do to save potentially wasting each other's time? Something like that. It's always it's tough on a call, obviously, because if you're on the back foot a little bit and the prospect's asking questions, you almost feel like your back's against the wall and you can't escape that situation. It's hard to like regain that control. But it's always worth taking like 2 or 3 seconds to reflect on what they've said, and then it gives you that extra bit of time to say something that puts them on the back foot a little bit, rather than being too reactive to what they're saying. What would you do, Jim, differently to what I said?
I'm probably in line with that. I think the key thing is not to like panic, I suppose, and it's an objection at the end of the day, and the temptation is to just blur out a load of words and try and almost like justify yourself again. And I think the key to it is just staying calm in that situation, and whether you throw out a label, whether you go along the lines that Stef has said there, or like ask a question back. It's about trying to regain that control. I don't know what you say, Emma, but just judging by it seems like you don't say a lot of words, which is good. But yeah, I think go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I think that's a good sign. don't know if you remember what exactly you said. But.
Well, I know I fall into the trap of going into the product, which is, I realised coming off the call, like I was just really frustrated because I was like, oh no, I've just gone straight into talking about the product and not asking him the reasons why he's asking those questions, or understanding why he isn't sure of what we do, or like Stef mentioned like earlier, in terms of like labeling. Well, I haven't told you yet. This is the reason for my call. I want to understand if those challenges resonate with you, and I do touch upon that, but we'll hear. But yeah, I did kind of fall into a kind of trap in that sense.
You can even label. Let's pretend this happened a lot, Emma. I'm not saying it does, but I'm sure it does to a lot of prospects, and you seeing that objection quite a lot. You can even change up your close a little bit, because your close was like, would you be open to having like a further chat, which could mean anything. You could say something like a bit more specific, just like, look, reason for the call, you don't know much about us, but let's pretend that we're helping companies in your space fix the exact issues that I just mentioned. But would you be against learning more to see if that fits in your world? Because then he's not going to turn around and say, oh, what do you do? Because you've said you don't know what we do yet. So you're combating that objection before he says it.
Yeah,
Because a further chat could mean absolutely anything. You want to say, look, we want to meet because we know that we're experts in this field. This is the mindset. You don't want to say this to the prospect, but your mindset has to be, we know your industry's problems. We know how to fix it. If you don't want to meet, that's fine, but that's ultimately your loss if you're experiencing these issues. That's the sort of mindset you need to approach that close with, in my opinion. But at the same time, a close like that can be deemed as like very laid back, and some people resonate better to that. So it's totally dependent on the prospect. But a prospect who's a bit more direct, a bit more abrupt, like giving that reason for the close is probably a bit better.
Yeah. Cool. Shall I carry on?
Yep.
And licensing.
Yeah. We have an IT asset management and licensing function.
Yeah, sure. No, I completely appreciate that you'll have that in place. I mean, is this something that you get involved with?
It's one of my teams do this. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And how are you currently managing your licenses at the moment?
We have a software audit tool that we deploy, and we have a function that works with procurement and other functions to make sure that we capture our entitlement for software use. And we do a monthly. We use a licensing partners to do monthly assessments of our consumption against our entitlement. We participate in a number of self-certification programs with Oracle, IBM, Microsoft.
Yeah, sure. And I guess with the sort of the challenges I mentioned at the start, did any of those resonate with you in particular?
I did. If I'm honest, I didn't understand what you meant by the challenges.
Pause, Emma.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean,
this bit's interesting because he's obviously been quite short, but he's also given you a bit of information. What are your thoughts on the questions that you're asking him at this point?
I don't know. I felt like maybe I could have delved a little bit deeper in terms of what they're currently using at the moment. Things that he mentioned, maybe picked up on like the consumption side, because I then went into that later on in the call when he kind of mentioned it then. So, yeah, I'm not too sure what kind of questions I could have sort of led with following on from that.
Sure. Firstly, I think you're very calm in this situation, and you're waiting 2 or 3 seconds after he speaks to ask a question. And in this situation, I definitely do it as well. You haven't done this, by the way, but what an easy trap to fall into is when someone's being short, you lose confidence when asking the question, and you might ask a good question, but then follow it up with some answers like, "Oh, how are you doing at the moment? Are you doing this by doing this or that?" But you haven't done that. You've asked him a question and kept your mouth shut, which is a very tough thing to do. And you've done that really well. You've done it 3 or 4 times. and that's a hard skill to master. I think in terms of the questions, so he said to you, "I'm not really sure what you said in the pitch," but then you've gone back to him and said, "What challenges resonated?" But then he said again, "Oh, I don't know because I'm not really sure what you said." In this situation, it's a good time to be very, very specific. Cool. I appreciate I was a bit open on the call, but like, typically, do you ever find yourself in a situation when, and then going to like a really specific challenge, like really, really specific? Do you ever find yourself wasting time that you're, I don't know, managing your licenses, or I'm not sure, that's not really my forte, but, and then again, say yes or no to that, and depending on what he says, then you can build on from that and start the conversation again. But just by asking him again what resonates when before he said he's not sure, it's just going to prolong the conversation that bit further. Um, so when you're in a bit of a hole, just be really, really specific and show that you're very knowledgeable,
Yeah.
and then that trust can be built up again, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And for example, I think he mentioned that it's his team that looks after some of the licenses. So
Yeah.
if there's a situation like Steph and I maybe aren't the best around licensing, but where using your knowledge you could come up with a problem that relates to his team not doing something that impacts him, that might be a good way to do it. What I suppose also add to that is that like being human and being like a little bit vulnerable to him and saying I might have messed up or that might have been a little bit of waffle at the start, and just almost like resetting at that point isn't a bad thing. Like you're not going to get a prospect who shoots you down for kind of for saying that, you wouldn't have thought, and if they do, then yeah, not worth your time. But
Yeah.
I think just showing that human side is really key, because it's very easy just to, as we've spoken about, fall into traps of speaking, not really sure what you're saying, and I think just had a comment from James Clark come in about saying like yeah sure, and sometimes it becomes a little bit repetitive, or might make the prospect think you're a little bit unsure yourself. So
Mm.
showing that human side I think is really important. And then following up with a question like Steph alluded to is a good way to combat that. I think we probably
Just,
covered.
I was
Go
going to
on,
say
Steph.
just on that, Jim, on that point, that's a really good point about being human. Obviously, you've been human throughout the whole process, and throughout this call, Emma. But just in terms of how that translates to a conversation, instead of saying like Clarky said, "Yeah, sure," just like be extra curious. Oh, cool. Like we hear that quite a lot. Like how you find that at the moment? Because
Mm.
yeah, sure is like, oh yeah, sure, and now I'm going to answer your question.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that it's a kind of a bit of a little bit of like a habit or a tick that sometimes I do, and it's really annoying because when I listen back to calls, I'm like, oh no, what am I doing? But yeah, just literally, I think that's part of it was because I was a bit put off by the way he was responding. And I felt like I was then just sort of like digging a hole and not just kind of being upfront about maybe that I've not been on the right lines, and he doesn't understand it, and just been honest about that.
Definitely,
Sure.
definitely. Worth touching on, because it's quite relevant, the question that Amir's asked about what categories should we put prospect personalities into, and then how should we handle the different personalities. Obviously, it seems like this guy's quite direct, and we've covered it. But would you guys have any comments about different personalities you come across outside of this call, or even this person, for example?
I think in simple terms, that's a really good question. So I don't want I can't probably answer that in a technical way. But I think in simple terms, like in terms of handling a personality, prospects buy or they're brought into salespeople who are like them, I guess. So it's all about mirroring their personality. So you just become obviously be yourself, obviously, but you don't want to be like too much of yourself because I know that could be a bit cringe. But be yourself, but also mirror the prospect and their tone and their behaviour. Because if someone's like this is quite blunt, quite direct, quite monotone, you can just do that as well and get on their level. If someone's really chatty, using certain language, certain tones, then you can mirror that as well. But you don't want to do something completely different to what the prospect's saying. So in answer to your question, I mean, I'm not sure about the different categories because everyone's different. but I think doing your best to match them as quickly as possible is key. What about you guys? What do you think?
Yeah, 100% agree. Like tone, language are really key. I'm sure there are categorized kind of like personalities that you can, whether you've got someone who's direct, authoritative, someone who's a relationship type of person. There's probably maybe like 3 or 4 main ones that you could fall into. But I think that's the key there. That as someone who's doing outbound prospecting, is that you maintain a level of calmness, like Emma has done on this call, but then show that flexibility to adapt to whoever that person is on the other end of the phone in front of you, and just mirror them.
Definitely. Really good points. And I think a lot of it just comes down to experience and just having different experiences, speaking to different people, and then understanding that the going from the conversations that you've had, understanding the types of people that you're speaking to, and going from there. I feel, and I remember when I first started, I was just kind of the same with everything. Hi, how are you? And if you're going to introduce with that to this person on the phone or someone else who's really direct, they're not gonna entertain it. So you just have to be frank with them and just say this is a cold call, which I do generally open with. But then there's other people who go, oh hi, how are you? And you go, oh I'm good, thanks. How's your day going? And it's more of a conversation and a relationship building because they actually are interested. So it's just working out what people how they come across really.
Definitely. Like me and Jim always say, there's no silver bullet in sales, and you need to. I know there's always advice and tricks and tips, but there's not one thing that works for everyone and for every prospect. So you need to have that core skills and core questions or phrases or openers that you typically use. So the ability to be adaptable and flexible at any time, whether that's before the call or during the call, thinking on the spot is such a key skill. And it goes into not just prospecting, but selling as well. You're not going to sell to everyone the same. You can have the same process, but you need to be able to switch it up a little bit. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Emma, the experience point, like being able to listen back to calls and put yourself in this environment, obviously helps with that. I just want to say, really enjoying the questions that are coming through. There's lots of them. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get through to all of them, but like keep them coming in. If anyone's got answers to those questions as well, like put them in the comments. That'd be great to see. Should we crack on?
Yeah.
No, how so?
I didn't really understand what you meant by them say when each company has a different licensing model and it's complex because and from an audit point of view, each will rely on their own audit metrics. So I'm not quite sure what you mean. We're no different from anybody else from that point of view. Everybody will have that challenge.
Yeah, sure. No, I completely appreciate that. I mean, with the sort of the cost management side of things, is that something that?
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? The cost management side of things.
So
do you mean the procurement side or the consumption side?
The consumption side. So we've been doing a lot of work in terms of helping organisations actually understand what applications are being fully used, especially with like Microsoft and different Microsoft suites. A lot of organisations and their end users are not actually using them to their full potential. So understanding what you mean
about adoption of tools that they've got?
Yeah, so and utilisation. So we're able to sort of give that insight into their license usage.
You get that straight out of the Microsoft dashboard about Microsoft license if they're Office 3. We're Office 365. So
pause it, Emma. Sorry.
Data straight out of the Microsoft dashboard.
One thing I was going to say is you've obviously you're combating this situation pretty well. You're remaining calm throughout. One little tweak I would say is he said like I don't really know what you mean. Like everyone's having these issues, and then you follow that up with like we've been doing a lot of work. One thing that we see work is instead of that phrase, just say, look, that's cool, but what we typically find speaking to people in the position is they're having this problem. So start with that, like we typically find, instead of we're doing this work, because it means that you're speaking about the people in his position rather than what you're doing. So it's very minor. We typically find that someone's having this issue and it can lead to this impact. Are you finding this right now, Mr. Prospect, Mrs. Prospect? Or and it's almost like asking another question about the challenges, but a bit more directly, and you're incorporating the impact in there. But everyone's got these issues, Mr. Prospect, like you said. But we typically help companies who are finding this implication or impact as a result of this problem. Would you put yourself in them shoes? It's a bit more, and then you ended a sentence with usage, but then you didn't follow up with a question.
Yeah.
Every time you answer a question, to get the control back, just follow up with a question. Do you find that, or what do you think of that, or could I have explained anything better just now, or anything that's still unclear to you, Mr. Prospect? Just keep that dialogue strong, and that will slowly give you back control. So
Yeah.
I threw a lot at you there.
No, it's all right. No, it's super valid points. I mean, I found when I was in this call, I was kind of just in a little bit of shock, to be honest, because I wasn't really expecting this reaction and this kind of, I don't know, I just didn't really expect him to not understand. That's why I kind of thought maybe he's not the right person. And he kind of put me a little bit on the spot, and I kind of, yeah, just felt probably I was a bit panicked in some sense. I don't feel I showed that across on the phone, but inside I remember feeling quite panicky. And yeah, and I think at that point there was just like loads of questions going in my head, like what do I say now? And it's when you're in that situation, you go, and you're not really taking in what he's saying, and you're just constantly thinking of what am I going to say next. And I think that clouded my mind in this situation.
Just on that, that's a really good point, because you can find yourself in a hole very quickly, and like Jim said a moment ago, we're all human. If you feel that you're in that situation, you can always label that. Just be like, Mr. Prospect, Mrs. Prospect, I feel like I've done a really bad job up to this point in this call to explain what we do. Let's just start again. And then you've got license to pitch him a little bit there, and then maybe go into like another challenge, or maybe just clarify a few things. But if you ever feel that way, you'd never be afraid to label it. Most probably, I feel a bit uncomfortable. I feel like I've done a really bad job in explaining the challenges, and it seems like you don't really understand, and that's my fault. Let's start again. And then he's not gonna be like, no. He'd be like, okay, cool, sounds good. This sales rep's been vulnerable, and I respect that. So always have that in the back of your mind. Never, no matter what feeling or emotion you're going through, don't be afraid to get out in the air on the call.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
What's
But like,
the worst that happens?
I was going to say, like, Ashley, yeah, exactly. And like Ashley said, he would have crumbled on the phone to this guy, and that's, I guess, I would have as well. So you might have been crumbling inside, but the most important thing is you haven't shown that to the prospect. So fair play.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where I was like, I would rather him hang up on me right now and tell me to go away than to actually sustain an 8-minute conversation.
What I think is interesting though, is that obviously you said that's how you feel, and like we've all been there on the back foot, clouded and that. But listening to this guy, the questions he's asking is, I don't think he's someone who's being like a smart ass or rude, for example, or like trying to wind you up. I think he is just generally trying to understand, and his persona is someone who asks these things in a very short, direct way. So I think doing what Steph said, resetting, being human, I just think that would work. He's not just doing it just to, he hates cold callers and he's trying to wind you up. I think he's just trying to understand what you do, and relating back to what we said at the start, the pitch was quite long and lots of different challenges. You can understand why he might be in that position. So it's just being able to like reset and feel comfortable doing so is important.
Yeah, so true.
Cool.
Sorry, Jim. I was gonna. Amir posted another question. Loving the questions. Just in regards to that last one, what if someone is really rude? Should I mirror that too? In short, no. Like Jack said perfectly. Always be professional. But if you feel someone's being rude and out of line, you can just say to him, like, "Is it just me, or are you always rude to this rude to salespeople. Like if they're being, this guy's not rude. But if someone is like really, really rude, don't be afraid to say something back to them, but just do it in a way that means you're the bigger person in that scenario, rather than reacting.
I think a lot of people listening, I'll probably put myself in the bracket. That's quite an out there thing to say. But like, I agree. There's no harm in calling it out or doing it in a way that's like, if someone's been rude, then if you put yourself in their shoes, there might be something that's causing them to be rude. Like, I wouldn't necessarily worry about it. But yeah, I agree with Steph that no harm in calling it out. Although I might do it in a slightly less confrontational way, but that's just the way that I am.
Well, Jim, in your shoes, I've probably said that. I've said that probably once, like in my life. What you do is probably a bit different. You'd label that. Like, it sounds like you're having a terrible day, or it sounds like I've caught you at the worst possible time, or it feels like you're just a bit frustrated with people like me calling you. Is that the case? Yeah. It's a much softer way to do that. Exactly. And then if someone's rude again, then just like, it's obviously not a good time to have a conversation, but that can usually alleviate some of their rudeness in that moment, I guess.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, you can't control everyone's emotions, right? You don't know what someone's going through, so just never make assumptions.
Yeah, and if it's not working, then just move on.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's it.
Plenty
more prospects out there.
Definitely.
Yeah, sure. No, I completely appreciate that you'll have that through the Microsoft dashboard. I mean, that's just an example that we've been finding that it's not really providing sort of the comprehensive insights into that in particular.
What doesn't it provide?
Sorry?
What doesn't it provide?
So we've been speaking to organisations and finding that they are not actually getting that detailed view of their software estate, especially around the adoption and usage.
What will your tool do that Microsoft tool won't do?
So essentially, it's able to sort of streamline processes in particular. The automation side, I know that a lot of manual work goes into managing the Microsoft licenses within the portal. But it's essentially able to plug into that portal and provide more of a detailed view across the whole software estate and provide that single pane of glass. I mean,
for Microsoft licenses, I don't understand what you do.
Yeah, so for Microsoft licenses, but also for the whole software environments, are able to plug into discovery tools like IBM, other areas of applications.
What sort of IBM discovery tool?
Sorry?
You're saying it can plug into IBM discovery tool. What do you mean?
Oh, that was just an example. So it's able to plug into different.
Yeah, use that example. Which ones can it plug into?
So different discovery tools and inventory tools we're able to plug into.
Give me some examples. You said an IBM one. Which IBM
I'm not too sure. Sorry, what you mean by that?
You said it plugs into an IBM inventory tool. I'm just saying which IBM inventory tool. What discovery tools does it actually work with?
That's something that I was not looking to explain in this call. The point of my call really was to organise some time for a further conversation around that, if that's something of interest.
I really couldn't make an assessment whether or not it'd be of interest. So at this point, I'd say no, thank you.
Sure, no worries, Dave. I mean, web.
How are you feeling listening back?
Oh, it makes me feel. Oh, I just find it so cringe, but here to learn from it, so that's the main thing.
100%, and respect you for putting this call out there. That's not you. I don't think you're going to. I don't think you're closing it from here, to be honest, for a meeting. But,
no, definitely not.
You've held your own massively in that situation. He's been very inquisitive, and is coming across as a bit direct. But like Jimmy said earlier, I think he's just trying to understand what you're saying. I don't think he's being difficult. It's probably coming across difficult because he's trying to understand so much. But I like what you said around, look, that's not the point of this conversation today. But then you closed him. So if you were to close him again, the way you closed him was like, look, the point of this call is to have a further chat. It's probably similar to your first close, like a further chat, or like a, people say like a more, I can't remember the terminology, but a structured conversation.
Good conversation.
Yeah. And what does that even mean? It's just like, that's not the purpose of today. That's not my speciality. I've labelled quite a few problems in this conversation, but it doesn't sound like you're going through any of these at the moment, and we should probably end the call here. Because ultimately, if nothing's resonating, and you tried a few times, it's just letting go, isn't it? Really, and just saying, look, I don't think maybe it's not worth having a chat. Or it sounds like you're in a really, really good place. Just put them on the back foot a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it obviously feels like it's got to this point where there's been that back and forth, like you say, you're feeling on the back foot, a bit clouded, and you've gone to just close because it's almost just a way of stopping him asking the questions and trying to get to that outcome of obviously a meeting. Yeah, I think we could probably tell that the likelihood of him saying yes to the meeting is going to be low, because it's got to this point where he has said a couple of times he obviously doesn't understand or doesn't really have an idea of where you can help. But I can completely understand as to why you've got to or gone down that route, and as we touched on, like the fact that you've got here anyway, 8 minutes in is a good showcase of you just keeping calm, even if you weren't necessarily feeling it. What I would say though is this is like a great prospect to go back to, having listened, analysed this conversation. That one, you know what he's like, so you can change your language, be direct. Like, even if you were to send him an email, I don't know when this call was, but let's say that it was.
It was
30.
last week.
So not too long.
So
Yeah,
still a bit rusty coming back from the Christmas holidays. So not one of my best calls, but
no, I thought I think it's good. But point being that, like, for example, if you were to send an email after you just made this call, an hour or two later, and say, "Hi, Mr. Prospect," label that it wasn't the best pitch from you, but here's one or two problems that we help with, and maybe mention something around IBM discovery, like use some of the things that he had mentioned.
yeah.
Or again, just call him like the next week or so, and just again reiterate that it might not have been the best call last week, but here's one reason or one problem that I think you could help with someone in your persona. And I don't think you lose out too much in that at all.
Yeah, that's so true. Cool.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's like totally agree. That's why pitching like wider business problems is so important, and like touching upon like the implications or the emotion, whatever you want to put in that pitch, instead of like not the features per se, but like the smaller details, like you've mentioned about some of the buzzwords you mentioned earlier. Optimize, holistic, accurate, like real time. If you're pitching them, that means the conversation will be revolved around them. If you're pitching like emotion and wider pain, then they're not going to end up talking about like the nitty gritty stuff, like he started asking about, like the IBM programs, wherever he asked about. But if you speak about the business and how it's affecting his role and his team, then you're in a better conversation to have a more comprehensive chat and talk about why it's important, rather than like the nitty gritty stuff like I mentioned before, because then it becomes very technical very quickly. But it's similar to EngageIQ. If we're pitching about our product and how it provides engaged contact details and how we collect the information, then their questions will then be revolved around the tool, rather than us talking about how hard it is to have conversations and what that's doing to the pipeline, what that's doing to the opportunities coming through, and what that's doing to the business growth. Then that's more important things to discuss, and that's, you're in a better position to have that conversation. But if the conversation is going around the tooling route and the features and benefits, like 9 times out of 10, it's not going to go anywhere. Where you're really going to hit home is like, what's the bigger picture here? What does it mean for them in 6 months?
Yeah.
I don't like saying this, but what's keeping them up at night? Stuff like that. Never ask that, but
A version of that.
a version of that. What's grinding their gears right now?
Good points. I also find that that question pretty cringe.
Yeah, never ask that.
What keeps you up at night?
No,
Yeah.
definitely. But you want to gather that through your questioning.
Yeah.
Like I said, like lead them to that point where they're talking about the biggest frustrations and their biggest problems, and get them feeling like gathering like an emotional feeling about that problem, rather than, because if you're talking about features, benefits, and technology, there's no feelings attached to that, is there? If people are talking about data and integrations, it's like no one has any feeling towards that. But if it's them if their lack of data is impacting their ability to actually do their day to day, that's when it really hits home. That's when people really feel that personal and also that business implication.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
Last 20 seconds. You
play
turn
it
around
on
here, Emma.
Oh yeah, no.
Would be a better time to re-engage if it's not something of value at this point in time.
I don't know what it is you're trying to sell me, so there's no good for you. I don't want to either. Thanks.
Sure, no, not to worry then. I appreciate you taking the call.
All right then, bye.
Cheers, bye bye.
There we go.
And that was that.
I think the kind of the crux of it is what we obviously touched on for kind of the last 45 minutes, where he said don't necessarily understand, and I think you obviously want to get to that point earlier on the call, and then you can use some of those things that we've spoken about or close for that meeting. But I think as a call to listen to, that it's been a really good one, Emma, and I think as you've seen the comments, people should hopefully be able to pick up a few things from there to combat tricky prospects, because when you're making 50, 100 calls a day, speaking to lots of people, that there are going to be people like this, prospects like this, and not everyone's going to say yes after the initial pitch and close. And being able to maintain yourself in a calm manner and mirror those prospects is hugely helpful in the role. So I thought it was a really good call to listen to, Emma.
No, definitely. Great call. And like I said, Emma, you're one of your first calls back from Christmas, and sometimes after Christmas holiday, you actually forget how to do your job, and it takes you a few weeks to get back into the groove. So fair play for picking that call out. Takes a lot of guts. I was going to ask, just last question for me. What were the three main takeaways for you?
I think understanding the persona quicker. I think I should have picked up on when he said, "How can I help you?" as an alarm bell to be. This is someone who, I don't know, just maybe a bit more difficult. I feel like I've taken in so much information. It's like hard to pinpoint all the little bits, but it's been so useful. Like definitely around getting on much more of an emotional and personal level in terms of their challenges, and not the challenges, but what the implications of those challenges is so important, and trying to just put yourself in their shoes to understand that bigger picture.
Maybe I should have asked for your one takeaway rather than three. But that sounds good.
That's good. I would, if we can do one each if you want. I would add just that, just not being afraid to reset at any point during the call, and just accept that, or be human and say, oh, I might not have explained this well. Or, could I just give me another shot at trying to get your interest? That'd be the human part for me.
Yeah, and I am such a big advocate for being vulnerable, and seeing vulnerability is not a bad thing. Being it is a really, really positive and important thing. But that doesn't just apply to personal and professional level, but also when you're actually doing a job and prospecting. And that's not something that I've actually thought about or been an advocate for either. So yeah, that's a really, really valid point of just admitting that you're only human at the end of the day, and you mess up at some point.
Definitely.
You go on, Steph, to finish this up?
Yeah, my one was when you're talking about problem, doesn't have to be an initial pitch, but when you're re-talking about problems in that conversation, just pick one And be like really specific. Like, do you ever find that you're walking around day by day and you're experiencing this exact problem? Because we find this all the time. That would be it. Just like finding a really 2 or 3 really specific problems that you can just dive into at any time. If the conversation goes a bit not dry, but you get a bit lost, then you can like regain that control. That would be mine.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that, Steph, and again, thank you, Emma, for putting yourself forward. I know there's a few nerves beforehand, but like really enjoyed it. And thanks everyone for putting
Question from Danny.
Question come in.
Oh, did you find out how your product plugs into IBM? It does. It does plug into it. It plugs into a lot of discovery tools, including IBM. But I think at that point I was just really stumped and just didn't know where to go, because I didn't want to go on the product side of things. So I was just trying to think of how I can take more control, asking questions, but it kind of just backfired because I ended up being really stumped. So definitely a fresh approach repitch.
Thank you for that question, Danny. Right. Cheers all for your time. I think we next week, Thursday, we've got another episode. So look forward to seeing more people there.
Thanks, Emma. Cheers,
Nice.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Jim, enjoyed that.
See you later.
Me too.
See you later.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.